What's up guys, Andrew Baena here, and on today's video I'm finally going to attempt to explain to you guys how I record, mix, and edit the audio for the videos which you see on my channel. Before I go any further, I want to say that I am by no means a professional per se. I don't have any professional training for this. I didn't go to school for this. This is all basically self-learned by watching YouTube tutorials such as this. So I apologize in advance if I use the wrong terms or stuff like that, because honestly I probably just don't know any better. So take everything I say with a little bit of a grain of salt. I just want to try to pass along as much information as I possibly can to you guys, and hopefully get someone out there who is thinking of starting to record up on their feet. So in this video, I'm going to be using some software that is not free. There's lots of other options for free software which you can find yourself. In this particular tutorial, I'm not going to be trying to do something on the cheap per se. I'm just going to show you guys exactly what I do for my mixes. Maybe in the future I'll do another video where I show like a cheap or free mix or something like that. Let me know in the comments if that's something you want to see. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So for this video, I have chosen to show the most recent original song that I wrote, which was for a Fortin NTS Suite demo. This video is not sponsored by them, although I am endorsed by them. I feel like I should say that. Yeah, so this song I tentatively titled Gjallarhorn, and it sounds something like this before we go any farther. So let's get right into it. The software that I use, the digital audio workstation that I use, is called Reaper. The reason I use this is because it has a free trial that literally never expires, and I used the free trial for probably like 5 years before I finally purchased a license for it. So if you're looking for some fantastic, good, free software to get started, I would highly recommend Reaper. It comes with a bunch of stock plugins that are also pretty good. So the first thing I always do when I record anything is I always have a certain amount of basic tracks. So as you can see, I obviously have 2 guitars, a bass track, and drums at the bare minimum. So in this particular session, I have something called a guitar bus. And in that guitar bus, I have 4 tracks. As you can see, I have a track called left, I have a track called left DI, and then right and right DI. So if you don't know what that means, basically when I record, I have my Kemper, which is what I record everything through, and I have the Kemper set up so that it records the actual tone of the Kemper and then the DI tone of my guitar through the Kemper, both at the same time. So again, for example, the left guitar has a DI and the left tone track, let's call it, and then same for the right. So these are identical, just one has a pre-applied tone, one does not. So I always have the option to use my Kemper tone or use the DI and mess around with it more if I so choose. So I do that first and foremost, left DI, right DI. As you can see in this particular instance, I have chosen to use the DIs, and I'll get into that a bit later. The next thing I have underneath the guitar tracks is the track tone and track DI, and this is where I arm my tracks for recording. So this is actually where I do all my recording. So initially, like if I was to play guitar right now and track it, it would look like this, and this section would be down here. And then once I'm done with tracking and I'm happy with how it sounds, then I just grab both of them and move them up. You don't technically need to do it this way. I could just track right into here, but for some reason I always really liked this workflow better. Then underneath that, I have 2 tracks for bass. Once again, it's the same story as the guitar. So again, same thing. This is the Kemper B7K tone that I use for my bass guitar, and this is the DI of my bass tone, or bass guitar, I should say. So exact same setup as the guitar. And then underneath that, I have something called Mjolnir, which is my drum track. The program that I use is called Mjolnir. That's why the track is named that. So that's kind of the basic setup. So if you're gonna do like a really basic song with just 2 guitars, a bass, and drums, in my opinion, it should look something like this. And then here's where things get a little weird. My drums then split out to a bunch of other tracks. So if I play the drums, you can actually see what I'm talking about. Like if I solo this drum track, so what's actually happening here is this drum VST, the Mjolnir, is actually sending each part of the drum kit to a different track, so I have more control over it. So for example, when the kick drum happens in here, it actually gets sent to this kick track. When the snare happens, it gets sent over here. When any toms happen, it goes to these 3 toms, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, I don't do too much post-processing to it, but I do a little bit, which I'll get into later as well. So yeah, that's kind of the basic setup. Left DI, right DI. All those guitar DIs or all those guitar tracks are in something called guitar bus. And then I have the bass tone, bass DI, and the drums, which are split out to a bunch of tracks. That's basically all I've covered so far. There's a couple extra things in this track up here, such as the lead guitar, the DI effects, and the sub drops. So these are literally just a wave file that I use for my bass drops that I just use in every single song ever. It has like swells and bass drops at the same time. I just really like how they sound, so I've always used it. In this particular track, there's something called DI effects, which is literally just the DI tone, as you can hear. And then I also have a lead tone, which is again just the DI, but moved to a different track because there's a different tone applied. So that's the super basic setup. If you want to get going, I recommend setting up your tracks like this. So since this is a guitar related channel, I guess we'll go over the guitar stuff first. As I said earlier, I have the guitar tone and the guitar DI, both left and right, all on this guitar bus track. So I have the left tracks panned 100% left, as you can see there, and the right tracks panned 100% right. Again, the tone tracks are muted and the DIs are not, because I'm just not using the Kemper tone in this example at all, but they're still there just in case I ever want them later on down the road. So on the left and right DI track, there's actually identical plugins, which is just one plugin, which is called the Fortin NTS Suite. Once again, this video isn't sponsored by them, but I'm endorsed by them, so I might be a little bit biased there, but I think it sounds fantastic, so I've been using this a lot lately. So feel free to copy these settings, I guess, if you like. But yeah, this is the exact same thing on both the left and the right DI track, as you can see here. So you can see right DI, left DI. So they're both just running the same amp sim with the same cabinet settings, the same pedal settings, all that good stuff. Other than that, nothing too much going on there. And then I have the reason that I have all these guitar tracks in something called a guitar bus is because if I'm going to be doing the same EQ or whatever other effects to the guitars, I'm going to be doing it to both the left and the right anyways. So to save myself some processing power on my computer, I might as well just run one instance of that plugin to both tracks, which is exactly what this does. So you can see that the guitar bus is not panned, it's just centered, and then both the left and the right are feeding into it. And then on the guitar bus, I just have a very, very simple EQ. Literally not doing much at all. It's just removing the 4 kilohertz frequency range entirely with a very narrow band. Again, nothing too crazy. There you go, you can see it a little bit better there. Yeah, very, very simple stuff. Just get rid of that 4K because it sounds bad in the guitar range, in my opinion. Alright, so that's it for the guitars. Like I said, it's incredibly simple. I really don't do that much. When you have a good source material sound, you don't need to do as much work, which I'm always happy to do less work. So now we're going to move down to the bass side of things. So once again, there is the bass Kemper tone and the bass DI, which is again the direct input of the bass. So again, same thing as guitars. In this instance, I have the bass tone muted because I don't need it because I'm doing everything on the DI anyways. So in this instance, the DI has 2 plugins on it. It has the Dark Glass Ultra, again by Neural DSP. Shout out to them for hooking me up. So feel free to copy my settings if you want. So this is basically a digital version of the B7K pedal by the company called Dark Glass. This is basically like industry standard at this point for metal bass tones, at least in like gent and metalcore, I guess. So yeah, this thing is fucking awesome. Sounds fantastic. These are the settings that I use. I don't think I played with this at all. I just left it as is because I really liked how it sounded. Yeah, so that's going on. And then I also have another EQ. This time it's actually doing something a little bit more. Again, nothing too crazy. Well, I like to have like pretty extreme cuts in my EQs, I guess, which might be a little weird to some people. So my first cut is at 80 hertz, and I literally just remove 80 hertz entirely. The reason I do that is because my kick drum sits in 80 hertz, so I don't want my bass my bass guitar to be there at all. Just get rid of it. And then same thing at 500 hertz, or sorry, 250 hertz. That's kind of where like the hit of the snare I find really resonates. So again, I just get rid of that zone completely in my bass tone because I want the snare to cut through there and I don't want the bass to muddy it up. And once again at 500 hertz is like a pretty typical like mid-range for guitars, and I don't want my bass guitar interfering with my guitar tone. So again, just get rid of that entirely. So some pretty extreme EQ cuts, but that's kind of what I do in my mixes. So next up is the most complicated part, which is the drums. Once again, I'm using something called Mjolnir by Solemn Tones. I'm also endorsed by them, so shout out to them for hooking me up with this plugin. It is fantastic. I just use the default settings, which I think is called Max Seams Drums. I'm not sure why it doesn't show that there, but I haven't changed anything. This VST, I really like it because it has a built-in humanize function, so I don't really need to bother with humanizing the actual MIDI notes. I mean, I could to make it sound even more realistic, but I find that the humanize function in this is good enough that I just don't really need to bother, to be honest with you. So yeah, the important thing with drums, regardless of what you're using, is you always want to make sure you're doing something called routing. And what routing means is it gives you this like crazy screen where it looks super confusing, but basically what's happening is you're sending the kick to channel 1, the snare to channel 2, tom 1 to channel 3, tom 2 to channel 4, so on and so forth. You get the drift. So you basically set up each part of the drum kit to go to a different output. And then what you would do, at least in Reaper, is you right click on the VSTi and you click build multi-channel routing for output of selected effects. And then what that'll do is it'll kick out 12 tracks that are automatically attached to the VSTi. So that's where all of these come from. And yeah, so then that's basically how you set up your drum kit so that you can mess around with each part of the kit a little bit easier than opening this and, you know, like going through these settings every time. I much prefer doing it this way. So once again, my kick drum goes out, and again, now I have independent volume control of just the kick drum, and I can also add effects to it, which I do. Very, very minimal effects on this as well. So I have a tiny little bump in that 80 hertz range, which I was talking about just now. So again, if you remember on the bass guitar, I completely eliminated 80 hertz. So on the kick drum, I just bump it up a little bit, just like 3 decibels. And then I also use a program called Easy Mix, or a VST called Easy Mix, I should say, Easy Mix 2 by TuneTrack. It basically just has a ton of presets, and like I said earlier, I like to do the least amount of work possible because my turnaround time on YouTube videos has to be extremely quick. I don't have that much time to do these, so I just want to get something that sounds good and something that works as fast as humanly possible, and Easy Mix 2 definitely helps me with that. So there's literally a preset called Kick in the Metal Essentials pack, and that's what I use. It's as simple as that. So that just gives it a little more clickiness, I guess. I can take a listen here. So you'll notice if I solo the kick track, you can just hear the kick track. And that's what the kick drum sounds like with no processing. And then with the anyways, you get the point. And then on the snare, I don't do anything. I like the way that Mjolnir's snare sounds already, so no need to change that. The tom, I did something a little different here again. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're going to be doing the same processing to multiple tracks, you might as well make a bus for it. So I make something called a tom bus, and then I just put all 3 toms in the tom bus, so that way I can control the volume of all 3 toms at the same time rather than changing all 3 to whatever. I just find this a little easier. And then again, I have another Easy Mix preset on the toms, which is called Floor Tom EQ. Don't know exactly what's going on here, but I like how it sounds, so I leave it at that. And then the rest of the drums I literally don't touch at all because I think that they sound pretty good out of the box. So again, there's the hi-hat, there's all the individual cymbals, which once again I made into a bus. In this case, I didn't actually do anything to the bus, but I have it bussed just in case I ever wanted to change something on it. So that's pretty much it, to be honest with you. I know that this might be a little underwhelming because I don't know how to quite explain some of the things that I'm doing. And also, as you can clearly see, I rely a lot on presets and just easy options. So this isn't the cheapest way to go about doing this, but over time I've kind of realized I would rather spend money to just get something quality that's easier to work with to save me time, rather than spending a whole bunch of time with something really cheap to make it sound good. In my opinion, it's just obviously easier to get a source material that sounds good, and it makes your life a lot easier. Obviously, not everyone can afford to buy fancy plugins, and I totally respect that. So once again, like I said, maybe if you guys want, I can do another video where I try to do a mix using cheap or free plugins or something like that, if that's something you're interested in. But that's pretty much all I have to say for this video, to be honest with you. I've been kind of dreading doing this video because I feel like I don't quite know how to explain what I'm doing properly. So I really hope that this was useful for some of you. And I hope that if anyone watching is trying to start a YouTube channel, maybe this can show you how easy it could potentially be. Do not feel afraid to use presets. Do not feel afraid to use other people's presets. That is the silliest thing. You don't need to make your own sound necessarily. I am totally open about using other people's presets, other people's sounds. If they sound good and they're available to buy or for free, just use it. Who cares? You don't need to spend all this time perfecting your own individual tone necessarily. If you just want something that sounds good and something that works, especially if you're just making demos or something like that, man, just go for it. Find other people's settings, use their settings, copy the screenshots of their settings, do whatever you have to do to make it sound good. So once again, I really hope that this video was helpful in some way, shape, or form. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and that's about it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.